Welcome to our International Women's Day special, where we're embracing this year's theme, Accelerate Action. Today, we're diving deep into women's empowerment in leadership roles, particularly in the legal profession. This conversation is not just timely, it's crucial for fostering diversity, inclusion, and equity in our workplaces and beyond. The impact of women in leadership extends far beyond representation. It's a catalyst for transformative change, reshaping organizational cultures, and driving performance to new heights. When we promote diverse perspectives, we naturally enhance inclusion and challenge long-standing stereotypes. Female leaders serve as powerful role models, paving the way for the next generation of professionals. Their unique approaches often lead to enhanced communication, collaboration, and stronger corporate governance through diverse decision-making. Today, we're honored to present a distinguished panel of female lawyers who will share their experiences and insights. Join us as we explore the challenges, triumphs, and discuss the road ahead for women in law and leadership. Our panelists include Julie Chapman, VP and Head of Legal North America at LexisNexis, Debbie Coe, Content Lawyer at LexisNexis Canada, Suwini Abdulai, Partner at BLG, and myself, Helen Viduris, Director of Product Management at LexisNexis Canada, and I will be your moderator today. So I've been eagerly waiting to hear from our panelists all week on this really important topic, so let's dive in. Suwini, as someone who's been a partner at two of Canada's largest law firms, I'm interested in learning about your observations and experiences regarding how the dynamics and decision-making processes were changed by having women in leadership positions.
Sure. Speaking to those experiences, I think that we've seen a gradual shift over recent years with female lawyers increasing in numbers within law firms. I do want to preface my comments with the fact that I also, in terms of speaking about experiences as a woman lawyer, I also come from the perspective of being a Black woman lawyer. And so that intersectionality is very important, as this is not a comment specific to law firms and law, but just generally when it comes to women in the business world, their unique circumstances and barriers that lawyers who are women and also women of color face because of that intersectionality. In terms of seeing differences or any progress or change in terms of decision making, I mean, certainly you're seeing more women in leadership roles. They're managing partners, they're leading practice groups, and in those roles, that gives them the ability, obviously, to wield power and to make important decisions on the strategy of the firm, and also that impact, the management and the lawyers, the employees, the staff, that impact the entire culture of the firm. And I think that obviously it's a positive thing, and that's something that we've seen in recent years in terms of this, I'd say, a heightened awareness of the importance of diversity of views, especially when it comes to leadership and the ability to impact change, and encouraging that.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Julie, anything to add?
From the in-house, perspective, I mean, I agree with most of the things that have been said already. But the difference, I'd say, for me in the role that I'm in has been, I think the opportunities have actually increased quite a bit since the pandemic, or maybe even during the pandemic. Because one of the things that I found as at least a lawyer, sort of, moving her way up in her career, is that the somewhat unfortunate reality that still remains is that if you do decide to, for example, have children, have a family, there is that biological situation where you'd have to sort of take time off, and that has sort of the ability, I don't want to call it an ability actually, but it could cause some delays, I think, in your career trajectory. And your ability to kind of travel potentially for work, or maybe move around for job opportunities is hindered a little bit in those types of situations. So for me, when the pandemic happened, I think that was a really good way to have sort of senior leadership in businesses and probably law firms as well, though I can't speak to it, see that lawyers could do their jobs from sort of anywhere, and maybe when it's more suitable to them in terms of flexibility around schedules. So for me, that's been a big one. I mean, you can have kind of silver linings once in a while in these global situations that are mostly negative. I think it allowed us to take advantage of some opportunities that maybe didn't seem possible before that.
Right. Suwini, did you notice the same thing with during the pandemic at the law firms?
Yes, certainly. I think that there was a bit more of an understanding to that comment that we can do our work in a flexible arrangement and not necessarily having to be in the office. I think that it's so, I just think from I'll speak from my perspective, because I had my daughter 3 years ago, so I was well into private practice, and the nature of my practice does give me some flexibility. And from my experiences at both firms, I found the firm to be quite supportive of that. But then, of course, I had my daughter during the pandemic, so it was a different environment. I did have some empathy for my colleagues who I think of pre the pandemic and wondering how they did this in terms of, I wouldn't say there's balance, because I know that's something that sometimes people ask, which is how do you balance work and life? And balance for me implies that it's always going to be 50-50, which is not the case. That's just the way life is. Sometimes maybe work may take precedence over certain matters, and then maybe you've got personal family matters that you have to attend to. But I don't know that it's 50-50, but I do know that there was a shift in the law firm in private practice of that awareness. And I think it was also very helpful for lawyers who are young lawyers too, who are coming up and they're also building their families, to have that support and understanding. They were getting their job done, but they had that ability to, be at home and also experience their children in the early stages.
Now, is there a specific instance where your perspectives as female leaders led to a more inclusive or innovative solution to a challenge at your firm? And throwing it up to anyone here.
So I don't know if it's actually a specific, project where I would want to focus my sort of response to this question. But when I read it, the thing that came to mind for me was the opportunity to be involved in senior discussions around talent and contemplation, across functions about who may be, in a good position to move up within the organization. And I thought where women in the room, in particular, seemed to comment more or just had more insights that they either had or were just willing to share in these situations. And perhaps it's because the role of general counsel in a company is to work across functions anyway, so we sort of deal with everyone. But I felt like I was able to bring a unique perspective to these conversations, looking at individuals as like people and not just someone who's doing a role in a company. And so my comments tended to be more holistic when I'm talking about a particular individual who I may have dealt with, whether they be in sales or in product or in some other area of the organization. I can sort of say, well, yeah, when I dealt with them on this type of project, I felt like it was, they were very respectful in the way I dealt, they dealt with me, and their follow-up was excellent. So it wasn't necessarily focused on, the technical aspects of what their jobs are or their skills. I felt like there's a little bit more opportunity to share sort of just general feelings about working with an individual, which is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Suwini, how about you? Was there a specific instance where your perspective as a female leader led to a more inclusive or innovative solution to a challenge at your firm?
Sure. And I just want to note not to speak about any particular firm, but in terms of my experiences, I think an example that came to mind when I read this question was work allocation. So when we talk about matters of inclusion, it's one thing for law firms to hire female lawyers, and another thing to actually create the setting where they are having these opportunities to work on challenging files, for business development, to be getting in front of clients, speaking engagements, profile raising. So having those opportunities is how you grow and develop in private practice. And so prior to the pandemic, and again, when there was this more of the initial focus on diversity and inclusion within the law firms, we looked at, when looking at the performance of young lawyers and associates, and as they move their way up into partnership, to the extent that's what they want to do, you would see that sometimes there are certain groups, including women, and maybe diverse women as well too, where perhaps they were not necessarily getting those same opportunities. And that just goes to a natural, I think, I don't know if bias is the right word, but just a natural inclination that we have as people to work with people that, we like and who are like us, or who, we share maybe common traits or similarities with. But in that regard, that can be very harmful in this type of environment where if I am going only to Helen to give Helen work because of that, and then therefore not giving work to Erica, then that obviously is going to impact Erica's development and growth. And so in these conversations that, we would be having with respect to associates, I really emphasize work allocation and the fairness in terms of allocating that, because we can talk about lawyers who are superstars, so to speak, but to be a superstar, you need to also be given that opportunity to shine. And so if you're not giving lawyers female lawyers those opportunities, then of course, conceivably, that person is going to maybe have some challenges and struggles when it comes to the work. So we had this move forward in terms of a work allocation program where focusing on younger lawyers when they start, because this is where you need to catch it. So once they've started to, for instance, monitor their workflow and see what they're working on, and ensuring that they're getting those opportunities, as can be expected. Not everybody shares those views, and there were some challenges in terms of preferences that lawyers had for, how does this impact their ability to, work only with, work only with so-and-so, right, who they're comfortable working with. And so those were some challenges, and not sure how the program ended up, but it was one that there was some investment in terms of building up. And look, it's not perfect. Change takes time to make to affect, but the importance is, I think, actually taking the steps to try and make that change. And from my perspective, when it came to the work allocation, for it to be actually meaningful and impactful, I felt that we had to be comfortable being uncomfortable speaking about these topics. Diversity, inclusion, I just find sometimes that the conversation and the dialogue, it almost, it's said in a way to maybe make others who are not supportive of these initiatives to feel comfortable. And I don't know that we'll move the needle if we don't actually really attack it head on and address these issues.
One of the things that I have thought about a number of times, because unfortunately it seems to be a real issue, is an article I read years ago, and I'm sure you've all seen it, that talked about the fact that when there is a job posting, for example, women will go through the job posting and look at all the requirements and the skills that they should have. And if they don't have almost all of them, they're reluctant to apply or to put their hand up, to put their name forward. Whereas men will read this, and again, I hate stereotypes, but I think there's some truth to this one. Men will read it and they'll be like, all right, I got 20% of these. I'm good. Let's go. And so they're just willing to, I don't know if it's confidence, I'm not sure what it is, but I see it. I see it every day. And so I find that at least when it comes to my team, which is a team of 10 lawyers in the US and in Canada, that I try to actively encourage the women on the team to put their hand up for projects that may be outside of their comfort zone, to just challenge themselves and to be confident and to ask for raises and to do those things. You actually have to be direct with the women that you work with and encourage them to just give it a shot, because I really do see this play out almost every day.
Yeah.
So I wanted to add that I agree with both Julie's comments and Suhini's, that being in that position where I've seen the confidence of other people applying for those jobs, knowing that they only have 20%, I think I've been in a similar boat in the past where I thought, oh, well, I don't have the qualifications, I don't think I should apply. And I do appreciate the mentorship that I've received in different workplaces that I've worked in the past that have encouraged me to apply and give me opportunities to perhaps work in different departments or have different work allocations with different partners. So I think it is very important to share that and support each other in that network.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, and I think the messaging that everybody is saying is put yourself out there. They create opportunities for growth and development. Don't be afraid to ask for those raises, to work on those projects, particularly if it's a stretch goal, is what we're saying, right? If you're not uncomfortable, then you're not really stretching. So, and you're not really growing. So that's really interesting. So thank you for that perspective. Now, delving deeper on this topic of empowerment, when we think of those who come before us and have significantly contributed to women's empowerment in Canadian history, so such as Violet Pauline King, who was the first Black female lawyer, Marion Ironquill Meadmore, the first Indigenous woman lawyer in Canada, and Beverly McLaughlin, the first woman to serve as Chief Justice for the Supreme Court of Canada, and a powerful advocate for women's rights and equality in the legal profession. Debbie, when you think about your career, what type of impact do you think it has when we showcase more women in leadership roles?
So I think the main key thing that I can think of is they inspire future generation and break barriers. And I think the examples that you just provided really is an example of how that is inspirational. So in the past, in my career, I have had various women mentors, and they were in leadership positions, and I've seen them highlight the perseverance, the adaptability, and just the vision that they had for corporate leadership. And it was very motivational for myself, and I was very fortunate to have some of them as my mentor, and they were able to guide me through my career and through my path. And I thought so beneficial to have that, to have a woman mentor that can understand the challenges that I faced and provide me with guidance in the same field. I've also wanted to give back to the community in the same way, and was fortunate enough. Recently, I went on a trip to Ghana with the company, and we visited various organizations, and during one of our visits, we had a presentation where we talked about our career path. And I remember there was one female student that stood up, a handful of maybe 4 or 5 students that were women, and the rest were all men, 60 to 70 teenage boys, you would say, in the room. And she asked, what are some of the challenges you faced as a woman in the legal field? And I thought, what an excellent question. And I wanted to provide her with inspiration and motivation for her career path and share my story. But I think also the important lesson here is that in a male-dominated culture, she was able to be outspoken, stand up and ask in a room full of men her question, which not only inspired other female students, also motivated me to share my story more with others and hopefully inspire future generations to follow that path.
That's a really interesting perspective. Does anyone else have anything to add? Julie?
So when I was thinking about this, I think I was thinking about it from the perspective now of like the next generations coming up. So I have 3 kids, a girl and 2 boys, like almost 16, 13, and 11. So I also want to make sure that we're thinking about how this inspires and makes, boys see women in leadership roles, right? That's hugely important. So I can see that already, that with my boys, like, I think they're proud of me. Like, they're proud of the things that I do. They're proud that I do things like this, and I have speaking engagements. So for example, I was asked recently to speak at a student program that was being run at the Toronto Metropolitan University. So they invited me to be the keynote speaker, and I asked them if I could bring my 2 older kids. I mean, I had to bribe them with lunch after, but I did, and because they had to get up early on a weekend. But they did come, and they listened to it, and it was amazing, like, to have them in the audience listening to their mom talk about her career and about things like this. And they gave me like honest feedback afterwards, which was good and bad. But I just think it's really important to make sure we're not only thinking about women when we're talking about these subjects. We want boys and to be and men to be our advocates as well, and to see what we bring to the table. And I think there's a lot more of that than there ever was, and I just want to make sure we keep it up.
Yeah, what an amazing experience that you were able to have with your children.
Yeah, it was cool.
Suini, how about you? I mean, thinking about that perspective from the intersectionality of being a Black woman, partner at a law firm, very successful career.
I echo everything that was said. Representation matters, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but I think the saying is if you don't see it, or if you can't see it, you won't be it, or something to that effect. But representation does matter, and I've certainly understood the importance of that. I think in particular when I moved firms and I moved my practice, and so this announcement was on LinkedIn, and I was actually surprised at the number of messages I received from Black female law students. And the messaging actually also went, funny enough, to my hairstyle, because traditionally in the past, I had a particular style of hair that I had. So I was long, straightened, and so this is a change. This was a big change for a lot of people when I did the big chop, as we referred to it in the community. And so it was just very moving to me to see how that impacted them, because we have a unique experience with our hair, and there's many books and movies, and there's enough media out there about that in terms of how we are viewed or treated with respect to what our hairstyle is. Little things like, I'm just thinking of some experiences where with other Black female colleagues where we would be messaging one another over the weekend where, one would be like, oh, I'm putting braids in my hair. How do you think this is going to go on Monday? And this may not be something that our other counterparts of the firms would think of. Like, so if you cut your hair or you dye your hair, you're probably not stressed out over the weekend about what the reaction is going to be when you come into the office. And I can, have certainly experienced some really uncomfortable and disappointing situations in the office when it comes to that experience in the past, over the course of my professional experience, and not just in law. I think that's just the nature of society. But representation matters. So it sounds silly, but that was something that was very important, because it's a part of us. It's who we are, and to embrace that and to know that, okay, this person is in a leadership role and is comfortable with their natural hair. I think that was very impactful for those young lawyers. And just to that point about young boys and men, they must be they absolutely must see it, because if you're talking about those who have currently who have the power, really, some in law firms, and not even just law firms, but in society generally, in terms of like, the male-dominated industries, it's very important that especially young men who are coming up see it and they understand that. And so when it comes to even mentoring, for instance, I would, I don't need to always be partnered with a Black student or a Black female student. A white male student, great, right? So they can also see that experience. And then they also get to understand that perspective. I've had a lot of candid conversations over the years with colleagues who, and I want to say too that we all come from different walks of life and different experiences. And also, we also are in a society where a number of these things are actually ingrained. So you're coming up, as we know, kids don't see color, right? They don't understand these things, or even gender discrimination. But then when they grow up and then they see the world, unfortunately, they're exposed to this. So it's incumbent upon us, I think, especially with the younger generation, to make that change and that shift. But people are who they are because of those experiences. And then over the course of the years, it's great where those who may not necessarily have worked with female lawyers or Black female lawyers, I've had the opportunity to work with them, and then we also speak about what those experiences and challenges are, especially around the George Floyd movement, so to speak. There were a lot of really frank conversations that came out of it.
That's an interesting perspective. Thank you so much for that. So let's shift gears a bit and move on to gender parity. The World Economic Forum has provided the statistic that at the current rate of progress, gender parity may not be achieved until 2158. And according to their latest global gender gap report, it will take 5 generations to reach full parity. So Julie, I've personally seen your career growth from Corporate Counsel Canada to Head of Legal North America. So I'm really keen to hear about your observations as your career evolved. In what ways does gender diversity in leadership teams influence company culture and decision making?
Yeah, it's a big question. So I think one of the things that, there's a few different perspectives, and right now, I don't want to talk about politics, but the world is kind of scary right now. It concerns me, the direction that it seems to be going, especially south of the border. But what I can say for my part, or part of women in senior roles that are trying to get to a situation where there is more parity, hopefully more quickly than what is expected, is that it is incumbent upon each of us to be very open to opportunities as they're presented to you. So I think sometimes type A personalities like me and a lot of lawyers, we really like to plan ahead. And we want 5-year plans and 10-year plans, and here's where I want to be when. But what I think that I've learned, number one message in my career, is don't get too stuck on your plan. Opportunities will present themselves if you put yourself out there, if you meet people, if you're open to things, if you're willing to, again, get outside of your comfort zone and put your hand up. So don't be too stuck on your plan. Take advantage of those opportunities. Early on, I'd say part of the reason I'm in this role now is because although I was a Canadian lawyer, the only one within sort of a larger North American legal team that was based outside of the US, I put my hand up years ago and said, hey, I'd really like to start doing US work. I'm not. When you're an in-house lawyer, that's okay. You can do that, right? You don't necessarily have to be licensed in every state or every place where you may be working for the organization. So I put my hand up and I asked, and someone said yes. Okay, sure, let's do that. We'll start bringing you in on deals that are cross-border deals, and then you can start supporting certain segments in the US in terms of sales deals. And then I ended up taking over all of the legal work for global licensing. You just kind of have to keep saying, what can I do next? What can I do next? What can I do next to expand your role, to meet more people, to be exposed to more things? And you need to have people that support that, obviously. And so that would be how I see my role within not only the organization, but the larger legal industry and even technology industry at this point in which our company operates.
Debbie, what about yourself?
I agree with that, Julie's point about putting your hand up. I think you have to expose yourself to all these opportunities to learn. Maybe I've actually changed careers. In the past, I went into business and I changed into law, and I think that that's a similar situation where I can't be stuck on one situation where, oh, I planned myself for 5 years, I should be doing this, and I shouldn't look for other opportunities. I think you do need to open yourself up to more opportunities if you're interested in that. And of course, even if those opportunities are not available, you can continue to build on your skills. And as Julie mentioned, maybe find a network of people that can help support you. There's a lot of Women Network or and Diversity and Inclusion Network that you can also seek out to find these opportunities. There's Women's Law Association of Ontario that I've attended a few seminars in the past. Again, places where you can meet a lot of people that can help you and support you in your journey.
Yes, absolutely. Suwini, and do you have anything to add?
Only to echo what was said, which is raise your hand and go for those opportunities. And not be so linear, change something that I've learned because I've found a significant shift for me in terms of my decision to move firms, and going back again to raising your hand and taking those opportunities where you may be feeling discomfort, because sometimes we count ourselves out, as was the comment that was earlier made about the job applications, and then even also just promoting ourselves and speaking about our accomplishments, because although I say this, but I'm guilty of it because I don't do that I don't do that maybe as often as I could, but you'll find sometimes though that, again, not to stereotype or generalize, but men can be a bit more confident in terms of speaking about their accomplishments and also, selling themselves and what they have to offer. And whereas sometimes for us, and maybe it's just the way, it's a society thing and how we've come up, but we can sometimes be kind of timid and shy, and also don't want to be viewed as, oh, this person's, is self-centered or aggressive. But I think it is important to promote ourselves and also to go for opportunities, because that's how we also get that representation of women in these leadership roles.
Do you have any advice about how to build up that confidence for women?
No, it does not. There's a magic potion? No. Because I struggle with it. I laugh, but my husband will usually say oftentimes whenever I finished a presentation or some important call, he jokes about how how I sweat because I get very nervous. So I'm not one to say that I have the solution, but I think it comes with experience, and the more you put yourself out there, you'll start to get comfortable with that. And look, there's so many apps and resources for like breathing exercises, or resources for giving you some motivational cards, reading, etc. Whatever works for you, and I think you should do it at your own pace. I don't think that necessarily that we should put ourselves in situations where we truly are uncomfortable, and that we, that may have a negative impact actually on us or whoever it is we're dealing with. But I think it just comes with time, and the more you put yourself in those situations, and you can do it small. Like, it doesn't need to be, here, I'm putting up my hand to take on this, complex task or this complex file that I have no experience in this area of law in. But it is a matter of taking on, small, and then you'll slowly start to grow and build that. Of course, as I said, it's not that nervousness doesn't always, it may not always go away. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because that also, for me, at least for me, keeps some things humble. But definitely the more experiences you have will aid in getting more comfortable and getting that confidence.
Now, are there any strategies you've found to be most effective in challenging and overcoming gender stereotypes in the legal profession? And so opening that to...
One of the things that I was thinking as we're talking here is having to do with failure. And I think that women tend to take failure more personally, maybe, is the way I would describe it. We like beat ourselves up over something that other people may not have even noticed. So I think, and that would be a gender stereotype by definition, but I do think that you honestly have to tell yourself that, like, it's okay, and kind of even laugh it off in a lot of situations. If everyone makes mistakes, I had this conversation yesterday with someone on my team who did something, and I explained, you know, you had realized she made a mistake, we talked about it, and she kept saying, oh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, don't apologize for this. Everyone makes mistakes. No one has noticed this. And even if they did, no one's thinking about it. So I don't want you to think about this after this phone call. Like, when this phone call's over, put it behind you. Don't think about it again. Like, just move forward. And you have to do that, because otherwise you're going to be second guessing yourself all the time. And if you're constantly thinking about the mistake you made, it will make you hesitate to try something new the next time. And again, I think it really is true that most people don't notice or think about these things again. Really, no one's paying that much attention to what you're doing or a little error you may have made, especially if you come out and you say, and you own it. Okay, yeah, you know what? Let's fix it. And just figure out a way to fix it and move forward. That's what people want. So I would say being okay, getting a little more comfortable with failure and not taking it so personally.
So interestingly enough, there's probably studies on this, but I think sorry is often in our vocabulary. And again, I don't want to stereotype, but I do find that women tend to be, because they might feel less confident, they use sorry a lot. And I have the habit of doing that as well. And I think it's important to think that, you know, what do you really need to apologize for? And maybe set that out and make sure that you understand what happened, whether it's a mistake. You don't necessarily have to apologize. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. It could be some sort of inadvertence, and try to use less of that word in your vocabulary. And other advice that I would suggest is similar to Julie, don't take it personally and kind of let go. And I think that is the hardest part, to let go. But in the end, you have to think of the big picture, like what is important here, like what is important to you, and you can kind of move on from that. And I wanted to go back, I know in the previous question about advice to build that confidence. So I've been listening to a podcast recently to enhance and like upskill presentation skills. And they gave a lot of really good advice, where one of them, again, some of the advice was just, chewing gum before a presentation, using a cold water bottle that you can hold on to, because your body temperature goes up once you're nervous before a presentation. So those are some tips that you can do to help build that confidence in yourself.
Oh, that's really interesting. I never thought of putting that cold water bottle when I do a presentation in front of everyone. Suini, how has increased representation of women in leadership roles impacted mentorship opportunities for younger female lawyers?
I just want to say I love that tip, and I'm going to do that, the cold bottle. I love that. So how has representation increased mentorship? Is that what you said?
So how has that increased representation?
No, certainly. And do you know what? I'd say that it's not necessarily female lawyers mentoring other female lawyers, but there are male lawyers who are attuned to this. Maybe not in the same number as women, but as women, this is our lived experience, so we get it. But there are also male lawyers who are attuned to this and are playing their role in trying to increase representation. But when it comes to mentorship, I think you're seeing those in the various leadership positions who are sending the elevator back down, so to speak, and playing a role. So I'll speak from the perspective of private practice, but playing a role within the firm in terms of firm committees, and not necessarily committees that are woman focused, like a women's professional committee, but committees that that address matters such as hiring practices. So hiring of the staff at the firm, but also hiring of associates, students, and then the committees that make the decisions with respect to compensation of lawyers, and that includes including associates and counsel and partners. So that, I think, is where, from the private practice perspective, the representation leading into mentorship is very important, as these lawyers who are in these roles, who are attuned to this issue, are focusing their efforts on trying to not necessarily remedy the gender, the disparity, but, and I say that in the sense because of the stat you gave, which is so daunting, but as I said too when we were having our planning discussions here, that sadly that doesn't surprise me because of the way we've had this shift over the last few years. In particular, it felt like there was first this shift in focus, more of a spotlight on these issues after George Floyd, and then almost as a result of that, and then recent years, we're now seeing a bit of a, don't want to say an attack on diversity, but I don't really know what else to refer to it as. But all that to say, representation plays a key role in mentorship, as those who are sitting in those roles then do their part, and not necessarily just the one-on-one meetings with the lawyers, with the female lawyers or students, but also in ensuring that they also have these opportunities and they have a seat at the table, and addressing their compensation and other matters that would be relevant to their development in the firm.
Now I'm going to turn it to a topic that I've been very eager to get to because of my involvement in product development, and that's technology and how it can help with the gender gap. And so from the 2024 LexisNexis Canada Pulse Lawyer Satisfaction Survey, results show that there is no significant differences in the stress levels reported by lawyers of different ranks or from different firm sizes, but 48% of women reported feeling stressed at least most of the time, compared to only 35% of men. From the same survey, 32% of lawyers are working 51 to 60 hours a week. And so, Julie, I'm going to turn it to you, just considering your extensive nature, like your extensive tenure at Lexis, where you not only had access to a diverse array of tools in your daily operations, but you're also providing us with legal advice when we're creating many of these tools. And so what observations have you made in terms of the role technology can play in bridging the gender gap in traditionally male-dominated industries?
So I personally see technology as massively beneficial. And that's because of the point we talked about way back in the beginning, and the comment about work-life balance. And I think that there's a little bit, I don't actually like the term work-life balance at all. I also don't even understand when someone says, I work 50 to 60 hours a week. This day and age, I mean, that doesn't mean anything to me. I have no idea how I would even calculate how many hours I work in a week, right? Because that's not the way the world works anymore. I don't get in a car and drive to an office and get there at 9 and, do my job and have my lunch for an hour and then go home at 5. So I do my job as things come up and as they need me. So the way the situation is for me personally is since the pandemic again, because a significant amount of my role is U.S. based. It's U.S. and Canada, but obviously the U.S. is a larger company, a larger country, more revenue there, more deals. I have to spend a lot of time there. I work from home and I travel to the U.S. from time to time for meetings, for conferences, for whatever it may be. And I just find the ability to, get on a meeting and do this, basically what we're doing now, where someone's virtual. I mean, does it really make a difference? No. I mean, I would like to meet you in person, but eventually. But for the most part, we can get so much done without wasting that 2 hours in the car or on the train or on the subway every day that we always had to do, or paying for the costs of parking and for more childcare and all of those things that I think you had no choice with before. I think that with technology, I think you have to embrace it. And when you're talking about new, exciting new technologies like generative AI for lawyers in particular, which is what we do, I think you have to experiment with it. It's something that you have to try. Again, it's not like you have to turn over your legal practice to, these tools. You want to start small, things that aren't high risk. Just get used to them, see how you can build them into your workflows, encourage your team to try, even if, I don't know what tools people have access to, but the heavy administrative things that you have to deal with in your day-to-day that really suck your time, right? Like scheduling meetings with someone, or a great example of where I was able to use a tool to make things so much easier was after the holidays. A lot of us were in and out, missed a lot of emails, things like that. We were able to put a prompt into, it was Microsoft Copilot, because that's what we use as an organization, basically saying, summarize my emails from the last 2 weeks. And it was fantastic. It basically tells you who, what the subject is, what they said, if there's an action item for you, and then has all the emails connected there if you want to open them up and dig deeper. Do you know how much time that saved me? So I think you have to look at technology as a time-saving tool, and to take some of the things off your plate that, as a lawyer, they're definitely not billable things that if you're working in a law firm, all those, some of the things I'm describing. But as a lawyer anyway, or a business person, or, whatever you're doing, there are a lot of things that you can use technology for, just so your time is more well spent and you're able to focus on the things that actually add value for your clients, and probably for you and your family as well.
Debbie, as a content lawyer here, in your previous practice, what are your thoughts on using technology to help bridge that gender gap?
So I think that there's a lot of great technology out there. One of the technology we use is Workday. And I find it's very interesting when started using it, and that you are marked or provided a salary increase based on metrics. So there's no bias when they're reviewing the employees. And I thought that was great. That's an excellent tool, because that can bridge the gap between any sort of stereotypes that other companies or firms may have. So I think there's a lot of technologies out there right now that can help this, bridging that gap. And as Julie mentioned, I do think that we have to embrace AI right now, because everyone is using it and it's very efficient and useful. And there are different ways to use that in order to help, I think, bridge that gap and minimize the bias that can happen.
Suini, I'm interested in your perspective about how AI technologies can be leveraged to create a more inclusive and supportive work environment for women.
So the irony with AI is that it's almost like it's double-sided, because it can do that in terms of having this positive impact, but then there's also the concerns of that the negative impact of it and how AI could be used with respect to bias. But I think that when it comes to the use of AI technology and relating it to us as women, women tend to traditionally, if you have a family, you tend to be the it's like a default parent, but when it comes to meal planning, and of course everybody's situation is different. There may be different resources, maybe their grandparents, nannies, daycares, etc. But generally, oftentimes the household tasks fall maybe onto the woman who's also in the workplace and working. So the use of AI, I couldn't have said it better than what has already been said, which is how you want to be mindful of your time. So any tasks that can be used, that can be performed using technology, then by all means. And I say that with a bit of a bias, though, because I don't know that all types of practice areas are maybe as keen for AI. And that will also impact law firms that are still based on the billable hour model, because obviously the use of AI is to make things, I'd say, and not saying that we're not efficient as lawyers with billable hours, but there's more efficiency to get certain things done. But that example, for instance, of I think it was the Microsoft Copilot summarizing all of the emails. So there's that efficiency that is brought, but then of course there's the fear for certain maybe transactional lawyers of how that impacts their practice, in terms of transactions and, turning the paper, which ties into your billable hour. So I say that I have a bit of a bias in terms of being not, I would say, indifferent to the use of AI, but because my practice is primarily advisory, ideally, AI is not going to develop in the way that it can work through a complex analysis, for instance, structuring a type of debt instrument for a regulated bank that it needs to meet and satisfy certain requirements, and those requirements conflict. So matters like that, where you'd hope, well, at least for me, I'd hope that AI is not going to replace me, but and of course, then that's the fear. Then on the other side too, I know that the godfather of AI, who has his Skynet fear of the machines taking over and getting very sophisticated and learning. But I think we should embrace the technology, especially when it comes to us as as female as women lawyers, because of the fact that it can also maybe free up our time to put up our hands for those opportunities, and then also, of course, focusing. I think for me, at least from my perspective, it's more than just work. Like home life is very important, and that time with family. If you have a family, that time is also important.
So unfortunately, our time is, coming up to an end. And so as a final point of discussion, if you were to give your younger self a piece of professional advice, what would that message be?
I can start.
Yeah, perfect.
Just go out there, network, join a lot of different communities so you can expand the number of people you meet, and opportunities will come up, and I think that's important. Find mentors that can help guide you through your career path, and I think that's very useful and helpful to have someone there to provide you suggestions along the way. So, yeah.
I would say be yourself, be authentic. It's your career is long, and you spend a lot of time, practicing law or doing whatever it is you do for, in your personal circumstances. And if you are not able to be who you truly are, it's going to be a slog. So I've found that you do need to find a place that you work and the people you work with where you feel like there is respect and where you're able to be yourself again with people. You're not scared to just say what you feel and share your opinion and provide your advice and hope that other people do the same. One of the things I was thinking about when you mentioned the saying sorry is that I really appreciated the fact that when I first, came into this big, larger role, which was a big step up for me 3.5 years ago, there was 1 or 2 male lawyers that I work with in the US who I really respect, who would call me out when I did it. They would, completely. I think it's the female thing, but also the Canadian thing to say sorry.
Oh.
And so I'm dealing with Americans, and they catch it every time.
Yeah.
And they would say, Julie, like, why are you saying sorry?
Yeah.
And you don't even notice it sometimes, but it is taking away from it seeming like you're confident about what you have to say and what you're doing. So I think you need people like that, again, that they know you well enough to realize that they can say those things, and you're not going to get offended, and they're truly trying to help. So be yourself. I don't think there's really any other way to be.
So any parting words of wisdom?
Agreeing with everything that's been said, and also to be resilient, especially in the face of adversity. I think it's easier said than done, but I just think if I'm going to give that advice to my younger self, it's that everything that you were, for us to everything that you're doing, it may not take shape today, tomorrow, in a few years, but it eventually will do so. And that's where the resilience comes in. I think that sometimes people will look at so-called people that they view as successful, but you may not actually see that journey that it took to get there, which is not pretty for most who are in those roles. And just to also use a quote from one of my key, I didn't say the mentors, but champions, who was a female lawyer, who would always remind me and say, Sweeney, it is a marathon, not a sprint, because of the pressures that you feel coming up in practice, and also as a Black woman, the need to work hard. There's this view we must work harder, and there's this concept of you work twice as hard for half as much, and so maybe you add a bit more pressure to yourself. But she'd always say to me, it is a marathon, not a sprint. What you're doing, it may take 5 years for you to actually see the fruition of that labor. And now, being on the flip side, after going to 16 years of practice, I certainly see it. And again, I stress this is easier said than done, because I know what it felt like and what it feels like to when you're facing barriers. But utilize those resources, and again, echoing everything that's already been said in this session, in terms of what you can do to put yourself out there.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you to our panelists for this engaging discussion. Let this conversation be the springboard for sustained advocacy, unwavering support, and tangible efforts. This is only the beginning. Together, we can create lasting change that benefits everyone. Thank you all for joining.